The day my life ended in a hospital parking lot. The day my husband became a doctor was the same day he destroyed me. I remember standing in the parking lot of Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, clutching a bouquet I could barely afford, my hands shaking, not from pride, but from exhaustion. 10 years of sacrifice weighed heavier than the flowers. I had sold my car, quit my marketing job in Chicago, moved cities 5 times, and worked double shifts as a waitress while he studied anatomy late into the night. I thought this day would finally be ours. Instead, he handed me an envelope.
No hug. No smile.
No, we did it. Just papers. Emily, he said quietly, as if ordering coffee, I think it's best we go our separate ways. My ears rang. The world blurred. The words petition for dissolution of marriage screamed at me in bold black ink. You're divorcing me? I whispered. He adjusted his brand new white coat and sighed. I've grown beyond this marriage. Beyond me. The woman who paid his tuition with her inheritance. The woman who skipped meals so he could buy textbooks. The woman who held him while he cried after failing step 1. I dropped the bouquet. Roses scattered across the asphalt like blood stains. That was the moment something inside me broke, but something else was born. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I smiled. Because if he thought this was the end of my story, he had no idea what I was about to write. Before I continue, please subscribe to my channel to see more interesting stories. Thank you. We met in Austin, Texas, when Daniel was just a nervous pre-med student with big dreams and empty pockets. I had a thriving career in digital marketing and a tiny apartment with bad plumbing, but I believed in him. More than that, I invested in him. When he got accepted into medical school in St. Louis, I left my job without hesitation. Just 4 years, he promised, holding my face between his hands. Then residency. Then we build our life. For years turned into 7. 7 turned into 10. I became the background character in my own life, working retail in Missouri, bartending in Ohio, freelancing at night in New York when he matched for residency. I celebrated his milestones quietly while mine disappeared.
No promotions. No savings.
No children because now isn't the right time. The night before his white coat ceremony, I cooked his favorite meal in our small Baltimore apartment. Candles.
Wine. Hope.
He barely touched the food. I'm under a lot of pressure, he said. So was I, but I swallowed my words like I always did. The next day, instead of thanking me in his speech, he thanked his mentors. And hours later, he thanked me with divorce papers. That night, alone on our couch, I opened my laptop and reviewed our old documents. Loan agreements, transfers, emails, promises. That's when I realized something chilling. I hadn't just supported Daniel. I had financed him. And unlike love, investments expect returns. Daniel moved out within a week. A luxury apartment near Harbor East, paid for with his new attending salary. I stayed behind with boxes, memories, and a silence so loud it screamed. People expected me to fall apart. I didn't. Instead, I started gathering receipts, bank statements, texts where he promised to pay me back when I'm a doctor, emails where he called my inheritance our safety net. At night, I cried quietly. During the day, I planned. I reached out to an old college friend in San Francisco, Claire, now a corporate litigation attorney. She listened without interrupting. Then she said 5 words that changed everything. Emily, you have a case. You see, Daniel never signed a prenup. And in multiple states we lived in, my financial contributions weren't just generosity, they were marital investments. But I didn't rush to court.
No.
Revenge tastes best when it's low. I let him enjoy his freedom. Let him post pictures in tailored suits, stethoscope shining, arm wrapped around a blonde resident he introduced as just a colleague. I watched from a distance, quietly rebuilding myself, taking online certifications, reclaiming my career, sharpening my mind. Because when I finally spoke, I wanted my voice to shake his world the way he shattered mine. Daniel's rise was meteoric. By his second year as an attending physician in Manhattan, he was featured in hospital newsletters. Dr. Daniel Wright, a rising star in cardiology. He bought a Tesla, joined an exclusive gym, started wearing cologne I'd never smelled before. And then came Lydia.
Young. Polished.
Connected. She came from money, old money, and she fit perfectly into his upgraded life. I heard through mutual friends that they were very serious. Good. That made what I was about to do even sweeter. I filed nothing, said nothing, moved quietly to Seattle, where I landed a remote strategy role with a healthcare startup. Irony is funny like that. While Daniel saved lives during the day, I studied healthcare finance at night, learning how hospitals bill, how doctors get bonuses, how reputations are built and destroyed. I didn't want to take everything from him. I wanted him to understand exactly what he took from me. One evening, an email landed in my inbox. Subject: Can we talk? Daniel. After months of silence, I stared at the screen and smiled. The game had begun. We met at a cafe near Central Park, neutral ground. Daniel looked confident, too confident. But I noticed the cracks. Dark circles under his eyes. A forced smile. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. Lie number 1. I just needed space to grow. Lie number 2. I listened patiently, stirring my coffee like nothing in the world was wrong. Then I slid a folder across the table. What's this? He asked. A courtesy, I replied. Inside were copies, not originals, of financial records showing my contributions toward his education. Tuition payments.
Rent.
Living expenses. Even interest calculations. His face drained of color. I'm not threatening you, I said softly. I'm informing you. He laughed nervously. You wouldn't do that. You loved me. I leaned forward, my voice calm but deadly. I did. That's why I waited. When I stood to leave, his phone buzzed. An email notification. From his hospital's legal department. A routine audit, triggered by an anonymous inquiry. I walked out without looking back, knowing this was only the first domino. And soon, everything he built on my sacrifice would start to fall. Daniel called me at 2:17 a.m. I didn't answer. By morning, I had 12 missed calls and a voicemail so shaky, it barely sounded like him. Emily, please. Something's wrong. Of course something was wrong. 3 days after our cafe meeting in New York, Daniel was quietly placed on administrative leave at Manhattan Heart Institute. Not fired yet, just under review. Those words terrified doctors more than death. An audit had uncovered inconsistencies in his financial disclosures. Nothing illegal, but suspicious. Questions about large transfers during residency. About who paid what. About ethical conflicts. The hospital hadn't accused him, but they were watching. Lydia stopped posting photos. His Tesla disappeared from Instagram. And suddenly, the man who once said he'd outgrown me couldn't breathe without my forgiveness. I finally texted back one line. I warned you. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine in my Seattle apartment and stared at the city lights. I wasn't celebrating. I was grieving, because even revenge doesn't erase the ache of being discarded. But I reminded myself, I didn't start this war. I was just finishing it with dignity. Lydia reached out next. Not angrily, not accusingly, curious. She invited me to lunch in Soho, pretending it was about closure. I agreed. Not for revenge, yet, but for truth. She arrived dressed in beige perfection. Her eyes scanned me, searching for weakness. She didn't find it. I didn't know about the money, she said quickly. Daniel told me you were comfortable. I laughed softly. I was. Before him. Her smile faded. I slid my phone across the table and played a voice memo Daniel once sent me during residency. His voice cracked with fear. If you ever leave, I'm finished. I can't do this without you. Lydia's hands trembled. You're saying he used you, she whispered.
No. Y correcta.
I'm saying he built himself on me. She left early. An hour later, Daniel called again, this time furious. What did you tell her? He snapped. The truth, I said. The one you forgot. That evening, Lydia moved out. And for the first time, Daniel was alone with the man he'd become. People think revenge is loud. It isn't. It's quiet.
Strategic.
Patient. I still hadn't filed a lawsuit. That's what scared Daniel the most. Instead, my attorney sent a notice of intent, a legal ghost hovering over his career. It didn't accuse. It suggested. Hospitals hate uncertainty. Insurance companies hate risk. Suddenly, Daniel's name stopped appearing on surgical schedules. His bonus was delayed. Invitations to conferences dried up. He flew to Seattle unannounced, showing up at my apartment like a ghost from a past life. "I'll pay you back," he begged. "Every cent." I studied him. The man I once loved, now reduced to fear. "I don't want your money," I said. "Then what do you want?" I paused. "I want acknowledgement."
Publicly.
Truthfully. He stared at me, horrified. "You want to ruin me."
No, irraplia.
"I want you to own what you did." He left without answering. But the seed was planted. The call came from Dallas, Texas. Daniel's mother. She was crying. "I raised him better than this," she sobbed. "He won't listen to me. But maybe he'll listen to you." That night, Daniel's parents invited us both for dinner. It was tense, painful, honest. His father looked him in the eye and said, "You didn't just betray your wife. You betrayed your own foundation." I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. By the end of the night, Daniel's mother held my hands and whispered, "Whatever you decide, I support you." Daniel broke down in the driveway afterward, sobbing like the scared student I once knew. "I thought success would make me happy," he cried. I looked at him gently. "It did," I said. "Just not as long as you hoped." As I drove away, I realized something unexpected. This wasn't about destroying him anymore. It was about choosing myself. 2 weeks later, Daniel sent me an email titled, "Full Accountability." He had drafted a public statement.
Honest. Raw.
Naming my sacrifices. Acknowledging my financial and emotional support. Accepting responsibility for abandoning me. He was willing to post it. In exchange, he asked for one thing. "Please," he wrote. "After this, let me heal." I stared at the screen for a long time, because what I was planning next would change both our lives forever. And once I said yes, there would be no turning back. I closed my laptop and whispered into the silence. Justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes, it looks like truth. Daniel posted the statement at 6:03 a.m. By noon, it was everywhere. Medical forums. Hospital group chats. Reddit threads dissecting every line. He didn't blame me. He didn't soften the truth. He named my sacrifices. How I funded his education, supported his moves from Texas to Missouri to New York, and stood beside him when he had nothing. "I failed the woman who built me," he wrote. The comments were brutal. Some praised his honesty. Others called him a fraud who climbed on a woman's back and kicked her away once he reached the top. His hospital released a careful statement, neutral, professional, but behind the scenes, his reputation cracked. Invitations were rescinded. Leadership tracks paused. I watched it all from my apartment in Seattle, my hands trembling. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exposed. Because the world now knew my pain too. But something else happened, something neither of us expected. Women began reaching out. Doctors' wives. Girlfriends of med students. Former partners who had been support systems and then discarded. My inbox flooded with stories that mirrored mine. And in that moment, I realized my pain wasn't just personal. It was systemic. A healthcare media outlet asked to interview me. Not Daniel.
Me.
I almost said no. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be the betrayed wife. But Claire reminded me, silence protects systems that profit from women's sacrifice. So I agreed. We filmed in a quiet studio in San Francisco, the camera focused tightly on my face. No dramatic music. No tears on command. Just truth. "I loved my husband," I said calmly. "And love should never require erasure." The clip went viral. Not because it was angry, but because it was composed. Powerful. Suddenly, I wasn't just Daniel's past. I was my own presence. I was invited to speak on panels about invisible labor in professional marriages. Consulting offers came in from hospitals, universities, even medical boards looking to restructure spousal support policies. The irony was sharp. The system that once ignored me now wanted my insight.
And Daniel?
He watched me become visible in the same world that had nearly erased me. Daniel flew to San Francisco and sat in the back row of one panel unnoticed. Afterward, he waited. "I didn't know you were this strong," he said quietly. I smiled, not bitterly, just honestly. "You never had to," I replied. "I was strong even when I was supporting you." He looked smaller than I remembered. I thought if I became successful, everything else would fall into place. "And did it?" I asked. He shook his head. For the first time, he understood the cost of what he'd taken. Not financially, but spiritually. "I don't want you back because I'm scared," he said. "I want you back because I finally see you." That hurt more than the divorce papers. Because he saw me now when the world did too. I took a step back. "Some realizations come too late to fix," I said gently. He nodded, tears in his eyes. And in that moment, the power fully shifted. A major healthcare foundation based in Boston offered me a permanent role. Director level. 6 figures.
Equity.
A platform. They wanted me to lead a national initiative advocating for partners who financially and emotionally support long professional training, doctors, lawyers, executives. They wanted to name it after my story. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. This was more than revenge. This was legacy. But accepting meant something else too. It meant Daniel's confession would become permanent history. His career would recover, but never fully escape this chapter. I called him before making my decision. "I'm not asking you to suffer," I said. "But I won't shrink to protect your comfort." "I wouldn't ask you to," he replied. For the first time, his love sounded selfless. And that made my choice even harder. I accepted the role. The announcement went public a week later. My name. My face.
My voice.
Not as a victim, but as a leader. Messages poured in from women across the country. Some thanked me. Others said they finally left relationships that were draining them dry. Daniel sent one final message. "I'm proud of you, even if I can't walk beside you anymore." I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "I hope you build something honest this time." As I boarded a flight from San Francisco to Boston, I felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
But the story wasn't over yet. Because the final reckoning, the true poetic justice, was still waiting. And it would come when Daniel stood at my door, with nothing left to offer but truth. Daniel eventually returned to work, but not where he'd started. The Manhattan Heart Institute quietly removed him from its prestige track. He transferred to a mid-sized hospital in Newark, New Jersey. No press releases, no spotlight. Just long shifts and smaller rooms. I heard through mutual friends that he'd sold the Tesla, that he rented a modest apartment, that he no longer corrected anyone who called him Dr. Right with reverence. Success had stripped him of humility once. Now humility stripped him bare. One evening, after I finished a keynote in Boston, I sat alone in my hotel room and cried, not for what he'd lost, but for what we could have been. Revenge had not healed me. Truth had. And yet, fate wasn't finished teaching either of us. My work began changing policy. Hospitals started requiring transparency clauses for trainees receiving spousal financial support. Universities invited me to help design protections for partners who paused their careers. Not everyone was happy. Anonymous emails accused me of bitterness, of emasculating men, of profiting from private pain. One message read, "You destroyed a good doctor's life." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. That night, Daniel called. "They're blaming you for my choices," he said quietly.
"I can handle it," I replied.
"No," he said. "This one's on me." The next day, he published another statement, defending my work, clarifying that accountability wasn't punishment. "I wasn't destroyed," he wrote. I was corrected. That act cost him more professional favor. But it earned him something else. Integrity. The call came from New Jersey on a rainy Tuesday. Daniel had collapsed during a shift. Heart arrhythmia. Genetic. Undiagnosed. The irony was cruel. A heart doctor brought down by his own heart. I flew to Newark without thinking. When I walked into his hospital room, he looked fragile, nothing like the man who once handed me divorce papers with a steady hand. "You didn't have to come," he whispered. "I know," I said. "But I wanted to." He reached for my hand and stopped midway. "I don't deserve you," he said.
No, irreplied gently.
"You don't. But compassion isn't the same as forgiveness." As machines beeped softly, I realized the final lesson hadn't been delivered yet. Months later, on a quiet evening in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there was a knock at my door. Daniel stood there. No white coat. No confidence. Just a man holding a folder. "I resigned," he said. Inside were documents, his remaining assets placed into a foundation under my leadership dedicated to supporting spouses who sacrificed careers for professional partners. "I don't want redemption," he said, voice breaking. "I want responsibility." Tears filled his eyes as he fell to his knees. "I'm sorry for who I was. Please, if not as my wife, let me stay in your life." I looked down at him, this moment so close to the one he'd forced on me years ago. Only now the power was mine. And I knew exactly what I would do. I helped Daniel stand. Not because he deserved it, but because I did. "I forgive you," I said. "But I won't return." His shoulders shook, not from loss, but from understanding. "I loved you when you had nothing," I continued. "And I love myself too much now to go backward." I closed the door gently, not in anger, but in finality. As I turned away, my phone buzzed. A message from a woman in Phoenix whose husband had just entered medical school. "Because of you, I negotiated protection before sacrificing my career." I smiled through tears. Justice wasn't Daniel on his knees. Justice was a world that would never again silence women like me. And the final chapter, the most significant payoff, was still ahead. Because my story will end not with his regret, but with my legacy. The invitation arrived in Boston Gold, a national healthcare summit in Washington, D.C. Keynote speaker, Emily Wright. I paused at the last name. I had kept it after the divorce, not out of attachment, but as reclamation. What once represented sacrifice now stood for authorship. The auditorium was packed with physicians, administrators, lawmakers. People who once would have walked past me without noticing. When I stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded me for a moment. Then I began. "I want to talk about the cost of invisible support," I said. "And the people who pay it." The room fell silent. I spoke of ambition built on unpaid labor, of love mistaken for obligation, of how success should never require someone else's erasure. In the front row, I saw Daniel, not as a guest of honor, as an attendee, listening. That was justice. That night in my DC hotel room, I opened my journal and wrote a letter I would never mail. "Dear Daniel, I loved you before the world applauded you. I believed in you before you believed in yourself. And when you abandoned me, you didn't just leave a marriage, you left a debt of truth. You repaid it the only way that mattered." I closed the notebook and realized something startling. I was no longer angry. Anger had powered my survival, but peace now powered my future. Outside my window, the Capitol glowed, monumental, imperfect, enduring.
So was I.
On the anniversary of the day Daniel served me divorce papers, I returned to Baltimore. Same hospital parking lot. Same cracked pavement. I stood there alone, remembering the roses scattered like broken promises. This time, I brought nothing.
No flowers. No grief.
Just gratitude for the woman I had been and the one I had become. A young couple passed me. The man wore scrubs. The woman carried a laptop bag. I wanted to stop her, warn her, protect her. Instead, I smiled. Because now she had options. I walked away without looking back. Some places only exist to teach you who you are. Months later, at a foundation launch event in Boston, Daniel stood quietly near the exit. When our eyes met, he nodded.
No longing. No regret.
Just respect. He didn't approach. He didn't need to. The foundation had already helped hundreds: career pause stipends, legal protections, counseling for partners, supporting long professional training. That was his restitution, not my return. As the room filled with applause for the work we'd built separately, I understood the final truth. Love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes, love means letting the past teach the future. People often ask me if Daniel ever begged for me again. The truth? He didn't need to. Because the greatest justice wasn't seeing him cry at my doorstep. It was this. The world now knew my name, without his title attached. I didn't win by taking his career. I won by reclaiming my own. As I stood on my balcony overlooking Boston Harbor, the wind sharp and clean, I whispered the words I once needed to hear. You didn't sacrifice your life. You transformed it. And somewhere behind me, the door to my past closed quietly. Not with bitterness, but with grace. When someone builds their success on your sacrifice and discards you at the finish line, the most powerful revenge is not destruction, it is elevation. Thank you for listening to my story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share my videos. Thank you.